Field by field, Maizex is bringing Canadian seed to farmers across Canada. Maizex is your source for high-performance soybeans and grain, silage, and grazing corn hybrids. Visit maizex.com to find your local Maizex representative.
Good day, and welcome to Wheat Pete's Word here on Real Agriculture for Wednesday, August the 28th. On this episode of The Word, man, people are incredible. We have to talk about that. Hey, Plant 25 is underway. As well, lots of yield estimates coming in, lots of yield reports. I think there's some interesting stuff there that we should discuss. There are still program dollars available. You don't want to miss out on that. And then at the end, tons of agronomy to talk about, lots of agronomy answers. Let's go! Yes, people are incredible. I so appreciate all the feedback that I get on the Word, from plot results like Tyler sent me, through to pictures. Mark sending me a picture of out in his tractor clipping his red clover crop, and he just said, "Hey Pete, I just want you to know I'm listening." That's awesome. I love that kind of feedback. As well, Matt and Harry biking. Can you imagine this? They're farmers here in Ontario. They're biking to Chicago, not on electric bikes. Like these are pedal power, right? These are leg power bikes. And Matt saying, "Yep, Harry is biking past a soybean field." And by the way, Harry may have had to go out and pull a few velvet leaf plants in the corner of a neighbor's field to prevent that velvet leaf from seeding and putting velvet leaf into Matt's field. Harry biking past a velvet leaf field and says, "Yeah, Wheat Pete would hate that field, baby. She's got volunteer corn, fleabane, and velvet leaf." And it's just like, yes, I'm having an impact. That is absolutely awesome. And I so appreciate you letting me know that. So keep that feedback coming if you could at all. It just warms my heart. And it makes me laugh as well, which is kind of cool. Hey, just before I move on, people being amazing, Paul Hermans, an awesome agronomist with Corteva Agrisciences, a good friend of mine as well in Eastern Ontario, if we will, Central Ontario, Eastern Ontario, the recipient of the 2024 International Certified Crop Advisor of the Year Award. Just a tremendous honor. Congratulations, Paul. If you get a chance, you see Paul somewhere, first off, tell him he's doing a super job. His email updates are excellent. I understand he does text updates as well, but just keep it up, Paul, making a difference in Ontario agriculture and recognized as the International Certified Crop Advisor of the Year. Kudos to Paul, 100%. And while we're on people doing amazing things, a huge shout out to the Roos family, the Tractor Skill Games this Saturday, August the 31st. 9:30 a.m., Culloden Road, just south of Ingersoll, in support of the Children's Hospital Foundation of London. Such a great event and such a great way to support the Children's Hospital, 100%. Shout out if you can make it to that event. Please do so. It's kids, right? It's Tractor Skill Games, but it's kids showing off their skills, learning new skills, and also tractor safety. So many, many positive things from that perspective. All right, I want to move on. And yes, Plant 25 is underway, baby. So Carl tweeting out, I think it was on Friday at Sarnia, planting winter canola into some of the best conditions he has in years. Meanwhile, Paul beat him to it. He was planting winter canola, I think Wednesday or Thursday, up in Bruce County. And social media is kind of cool because as Carl tweets out that he's planting winter canola, Lewis from Ireland tweets back, "Hey man, same. They call it winter rape, but seeding the exact same species, the exact same time, and I don't know, quite a distance. I won't say half a world apart, but a third of a world apart." It's, that is kind of cool. Just on that note, by the way, winter canola, I had a great chat with Chad Anderson, super agronomist in Lambton County. And, we talk lots about the planting date factor, and it's hugely important in wheat, in winter barley, and all those crops. In canola, we've typically said, 2 weeks before the planting date of winter wheat, the optimum planting date for winter wheat. Chad says, Peter, at the end of the day, we always get our best winter canola yields in Lambton County in the last few days of August. So if we can hit the last week of August, that is prime time. Man, for South Lambton, that's a month ahead of the optimum planting date for winter wheat. So that is kind of an interesting outcome. It's maybe less area dependent, or maybe we have to shift that earlier in order to do the best job we can. But something to think about, that's for sure. Okay, I want to move on and I want to talk about yields, because the Pro Farmer Tour, they're predicting record corn and record soybean yields in the United States. That is really amazing. Meanwhile, Kansas, and I'm afraid this is going to be true in Ontario this year, Kansas reporting wheat yields. Now, this is old data, but the range was 20 bushel per acre wheat, and you could move 2 miles away, and they got 80 bushel per acre wheat, and it was all based on summer or on growing season weather. That would be spring weather for us, but basically that growing season weather. As we move into Alberta, we're starting the early harvest on malt barley, on durum wheat. In both cases, both with durum and malt barley, low quality and low yield. High protein in the malt barley. That, by the way, is a bad thing, but the low test weight and small kernels, which is always a bad thing in malt barley. We want nice, big, uniform kernels. So not great on the early harvest in Western Canada. In France, they are actually reporting the lowest wheat harvest in years. Some growers in France at 50% of their yield. But the other problem, because France exports a lot of wheat, and they are in low protein and low test weight, both because of excess moisture and lack of sunshine through the growing season. It won't be a 50% harvest across the board in France, but low yields there as well. You just kind of step back and say, man, all over the globe, things are really, really variable. And test weight, that's one of the things. Aaron actually asked me a question, because Aaron farms in Wisconsin. He had pretty respectable winter wheat yields, but just terrible test weight. And Aaron's question was, what management-wise, what can I do to improve my test weight? We always seem to struggle. We often get 56, 58-pound test weight. This year, from 50 to 56. And so, Aaron, at the bottom line is that the biggest driver of test weight in wheat is genetics. And so, as you said, you grew 2 varieties. One was terrible for test weight. Well, if you live in an area, and Eastern Ontario, well, actually all of Eastern Canada, they know this in the corn crop, as well as in the short season areas, Dufferin County, that's not Eastern Ontario, but any short season area from a corn perspective, there's huge genetic differences in corn with test weight. Wheat is the exact same thing. If you live in an area where you always struggle with test weight, the best thing you can do is selected variety that has high test weight to begin with, and it still may not be a super test weight, but start there. And past that, all you can do is you try to keep that crop green through grain fill. The more photosynthate you can pour into that kernel, the better the test weight is going to be. And of course, that's a sunshine thing and a heat thing and a moisture thing. So keep the crop green with a fungicide as long as you can. That's the management side. Pick the best genetics, because that's the other component. Past that, Mother Nature. And in France's case, man, they think a quarter of the crop is going to make the test weight grade. And in the export market, that's just going to be devastating. Normally, at least 3/4 of France's crop will make the test weight grade. And so you can see that weather still plays a major component that you just can't do much about. Hey, just before I leave yields, man, the tomato crop here in Ontario, pretty disappointing early yields. And now, because I actually thought it was going to dry out, some growers are saying that they've already had 40 inches of rainfall here on their farm in Ontario by the end of August. We normally get 35 inches. They're at 40 inches, and we still have 4 months to go. Man, she's a wet year, but wet in the late tomato crop, late blight, just really devastating that crop. Tough to see a beautiful crop in the field go downhill like that. Nothing you can do much about late blight. You can try to spray for it, but it's one of those things that's very, very tough to have any impact on. So just lots of variability out there in yields, but overall, man, pro farmer, record corn, record soybeans. Crop prices, I hope they keep going up, but I wouldn't want to hold my breath if we actually get to those big crops that they're talking about in the U.S. All right, I want to move on and just talk quickly about some program dollars that are still available. So the off-calf program, really interesting. It's open now. The intake is ongoing and will not close until the money is spent. There are still a significant amount of dollars, I'm told, available. So get your application in. It's first come, first served basis. Soil sampling. So there's one, man, if you have not soil sampled, do it. Put in the application. For goodness sakes, it's one of these basic things. There's no excuse not to have soil sampling. But if you are a soil sampler, you can actually ramp the program up. You can move to one of these more intensive soil sampling systems. You can do a crop nutrient plan. With the soil sample, we can move to zone management. We can move to removal rates of application based on zone management. I think we all have to get there, so there's a great opportunity for everyone. You can also purchase manure to replace commercial fertilizer. Man, there's lots of livestock operations that really should get that manure off their farm. There's lots of cash croppers that really should be utilizing that manure. I think that's another great opportunity. There is dual action stabilizers from a nitrogen stabilization standpoint. Cover crops, we've talked about that as well, and also rotational grazing. Lindsay, pay attention. Rotational grazing, get some of those program dollars. All right, I want to move on and talk about agronomy answers. So first up, what is going on in the edible bean crop, in the soybean crop? Man, all of a sudden, we are seeing nutrient deficiencies show up in fields that we would not expect to see those nutrient deficiencies. You're looking at it, you're saying, wow, is that potash deficiency? Is that manganese deficiency? What's happening to the crop? Well, generally speaking, it's the uppermost leaves. And in talking with Horst and Ryan Benjamins and some really top agronomists, you look at it and you say, is it a disease? But no, I think what is going on is that we've had a wet year. When we have a wet year, we get shallow-rooted crops. And Horst has talked about this many times. Horst Bonner, the soybean specialist, Ministry of Agriculture, Food, and Agribusiness, he's talked about this many times, that if we get wet weather early, shallow-rooted crops, we really want dry weather early for deep-rooted crops. So when we get to this late grain fill period and the nutrient demand, the amount of nutrients that soybean or that edible bean crop is trying to pack into the bean, the nutrient demand is huge at this particular time in year. You have a shallow-rooted crop. You just cannot meet the demand. You just have not explored enough of that soil. We actually did some soil samples in fields that there's no way they have potash deficiency or should have potash deficiency. They've got tons of potash in the soil. We are still seeing what looks like potash deficiency on the newest leaves, on the uppermost leaves, which again is not normal. We normally see potash deficiency on the lower leaves, and the plant will transport it out of the lower leaves to the newer leaves. In this case, the big demand, it is to the bean, not to the leaves. So we're seeing those symptoms show up, and it's just one of those things you shake your head and say, man, nothing we can do about that, but it sure makes the crop look funny. All right, next up, winter barley. Lots of questions coming in around winter barley, seeding rates, seeding dates. Typically, we would like to seed winter barley 10 days earlier than the optimum date for winter wheat. We typically, if we're going to start before 10 days earlier, you probably start at about 1.2 million seeds per acre. The typical range is 1.2 million to 1.6 million seeds per acre on winter barley. It's just like winter wheat. Early, you start low. Late, you go higher. On heavy clay, you add 25%. But the one thing that I do want to point out, because there's getting to be more and more growers growing winter barley, if you are treating farmer-saved seed, and I think everybody knows my comment on Farmer Save Seed. How do we get new genetics if we don't pay for the genetics in the bag, regardless if you're doing that? And you're seeding early, you must use an insecticide seed treatment. So something that will control the aphids, because winter barley is highly susceptible to barley yellow dwarf virus. We have seen it time and again. Don't skip on the insecticide seed treatment on winter barley. Winter wheat is different. We seed it later. The aphids, it's spread, by the way, barley yellow dwarf virus spread by aphids. So we don't see it as much in winter wheat because we seed later and cold temperatures take out the aphids. Winter barley, make sure you use that insecticide. Okay, I want to move on. Ben saying, Peter, you're talking about 50 pounds of nitrogen on the cover crop. When does that need to go on? Can I do that in the spring to overcome the problem? Can I put it on like late in the fall? How does that work? Ben, think about this. The 50 pounds of nitrogen on the cover crop gives me 2 times the biomass, and when it gives me 2 times the biomass, it shifts the carbon to nitrogen ratio in that cover crop. We need that nitrogen on basically right away. We need it on at seeding or when the plant is growing, so that we, number one, get the added biomass, so we get the benefit of the added biomass, and number 2, so that the entire plant has that shifted carbon to nitrogen ratio, so that we can get breakdown through the winter, in the early spring, by the soil biology, as opposed to trying to get that breakdown by adding nitrogen and it not being in contact with the residue. Really important, I think, that 50 pounds of nitrogen has to get into the crop. Claire saying, hey, Peter, by the way, tell people if they do put that nitrogen on the oat crop, it's much more rust resistant. You won't see nearly the amount of rust where you add some nitrogen versus where you do not. And Claire, 100% right. Additive stresses, right? If you have nitrogen stress, you're going to get oats that just look orange from crown rust. If you don't have that nitrogen stress, they are much better at fending off the rust. However, Kevin's saying, do I spray my forage oats, my cover crop oats that I'm going to harvest for forage, with a fungicide? And Kevin, the answer is absolutely. But timing is also critical. Remember that in order to get benefit out of a fungicide, you need at least 21 days of growth for that fungicide to work with the plant and allow the plant to generate more biomass. So get that on at least 21 days before you're going to harvest that crop, which means it probably needs to go on now or last week or somewhere pretty soon, because trying to harvest oats as forage in October just gets to be about impossible. Okay, want to move on and talk about broadcasting crops into standing crops. A ton of questions about that. So first off, Roger saying broadcast wheat into soybeans. If you're going to broadcast anything into standing soybeans, first off, do it early. As soon as you see any yellow leaf at the bottom of the plant, it needs to be on there. Particularly, Jason, you asked about Timothy. Man, if the Timothy seed gets on top of a leaf, it's never going to germinate. So get it done early. Will Timothy work? I think so. It's a small seed. It should nestle into the soil reasonably well. You get some moisture. And this is kind of cool. Like, we are seeing more and more growers seed Timothy after soybeans, take a hay crop, and then after the hay crop comes off in late May or early June, then they plant another crop that year. It's just kind of an overwintering forage crop, which fits the horse hay market really well. Who knew? But it is a cool opportunity. I won't spend more time there. But yes, Jason, I think it will work. It's too early for the Timothy, but the development will be much slower in the soybean canopy. So even though it's earlier than we would normally seed it, because normally we want to seed it kind of the last week of September, I think that the development will be slow enough that it will work. Roger, you're going to broadcast that wheat seed? Then make sure you do it early. But here's the other part. I talked about this last year. I'm out of the game if we don't use treated seed, because bunt is it can be 100% crop loss. And I'm out of the game if we use treated seed, because now we get treated seed in the soybeans. And so I've talked with many producers. Some of them continue to do it, and they use treated wheat seed, and they say, if I see any treated wheat seed in the soybeans, I know I have to clean it out. You can clean it out. I just know that is a cost of having good wheat. I have other growers who just say, no, I'm going to take the risk on bunt. We're going to continue to plant or broadcast untreated wheat seed. Well, man, just remember, if you get bunt, it's 100% crop loss. So there's some huge risk to doing it, but at least if you're going to do it early. But please understand the risk, whichever way you decide to do that. Pete, you asked about broadcasting clover into standing wheat just before harvest. Yeah, that could work. We haven't tried that, but it would be certainly worth trying. I think that's kind of interesting. And a caller asking about broadcasting rye into his standing corn so that he can get it into the crop and not have to worry about too wet after he takes the cob meal off, and the fact that he's trying to no-till into mud. You know, our success with broadcasting rye into a standing corn crop is really quite sporadic. So try it with the drone. Some years I think you'll get a decent stand, but again, I think you want to do it reasonably early, kind of 1st of September or by the 15th of September. You need some moisture. You don't want it to struggle too long with the corn crop there. So I think seeding it in late or mid-August would be too early. But rye is just a bit of a different beast. I think it doesn't germinate as easily as wheat. Wheat works. I think Timothy will work. I think clover will work. They're small seeds. Rye is a big seed and doesn't imbibe moisture the way wheat does. It will be a bit more challenging. But hey, give it a try. Make sure you tell us how it works. Hey, if you get a chance, we'll link it in the post. But listen to this Real Ag video on boron. Because boron, man, I am so skeptical on boron. Dale Cowan saying that it may be that we just aren't getting movement in the plant. And this is just an example of where science and technology may move the bar and may not. It's not a done deal, but it's a really interesting thought process, something that I think is worth listening to. And with that, I am way over time. That's it. That's all. On behalf of the team here at Real Agriculture, this is Wheat Pete with the word for Wednesday, August the 28th. Keep the feedback coming. I'll talk to you next week, and I'll just keep talking way too long. See you then.